When I first started writing scientific papers, my introductions would be just so much, just would just be filled with background information on the topic. Let's say I'm writing a paper about concrete, which I was, and if we look at my paper, it would just be like this whole big lesson on what concrete is, how it's made. But I never really state why I needed to do research on it, and so my papers, the rest of my paper would be really meaningless. And I'd look for purpose in the rest of the paper, but that purpose should have been established in the introduction. And so now I've studied, and now when I look at how to actually write an introduction, I realize everything wrong that I was doing. And so now I'm going to share this knowledge with you. And your introduction can really be a game changer, because it not only impacts what your reader thinks, but it also impacts the progression of your paper, how much purpose it can give you. Because my paper on concrete didn't give me much purpose after that. I screwed up the introduction and I wrote just a whole lesson on what concrete is, because that's not what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to make it so that it gave me that purpose, and the rest of my paper didn't fall apart. So the introduction isn't really about the reader, although it is, but it also shapes how your paper actually progresses and how you feel about it at the end. So let's look at the introduction. First of all, this is the key point. So in the introduction, you must look at 3 key points. What was I studying? So the context of the work, the relevant primary research, and the current understanding. So if I was writing about concrete, I'd provide some background information on concrete, like the basics. So I'd narrow the information to concrete. I'd say concrete is one of the most used materials in the world, or one of the most cheapest yet efficient materials in the world, something like that. And then I'd take it into, I'd take it and then I'd outline the relevant primary research and what the current understanding is and all that. So basically, what is already known about the topic you're studying? Okay, now you want to next thing, number 2, you want to identify the gap. Basically, the reason you're conducting a research is because there's something wrong. That you've identified a gap, you've identified something wrong, and so you want to address that. So now you want to include your gap. So what is your purpose? What is the purpose about the topic being investigated? So you're looking at concrete. Now I want to say, let's say I want to talk about the curing time of concrete. I'd say, although the physical properties of concrete are well understood, the chemical properties are not yet as much. And so I then narrow it down to curing time, and I'd say the curing time of concrete has been a long debated question among many engineers, something like that. Not exactly, we've got proper examples later, but I'll identify a gap. And then third, I'll talk about how the study advances the knowledge. So why do we need this research? What are the important real-world implications about the investigation? So for that concrete one, I'd say something like understanding the curing time of concrete is extremely essential, as it will, transform the way we, create concrete, something like that. And so what we've been doing here is that we started off really general. What is concrete? Then we looked at, okay, so let's go into a bit more specific, and then we'll talk about a gap. So why I need to do this research. So now we're going a little specific, and then we're ending it off really specific, and you want to narrow it down by, showing how the study will advance the knowledge and what your specific scientific inquiry question is. So here's where you introduce your inquiry question. So the thing you'll be investigating. Okay? So yeah, so in the middle, you want to make a comment, and then you want to narrow it down to that one question. So now what do you do next? So now what are the next key points? So here is the progression of your introduction. At the start, you want to engage the reader. So at the start of the introduction, it is important that the opening sentence enables the reader to jump into your paper. So at the start, you want to provide a general statement that everyone knows, and so everyone can relate to it, and then they can start reading the next sentence. The first sentence should be something really general and something really important. Concrete is essential to the Industrial Revolution, or something like that. Like, it's not actually essential to the Industrial Revolution. That's something I made up on the spot. But yeah, something that people can relate to and then easily grasp as they go through the next of your paper. Now, after that, you want to present the information. You want to show how this information is actually important, and then you want to narrow it down to the gap, right? So you want to create a smooth flow between the engagement and the problem, and so in between them there's a good presentation of the information. And when you present the information, you lead them down the path, and you say concrete is made out of four ingredients, and it has to be set. And this setting time is called curing time. See how I introduced curing time? I could talk about something else about concrete. I could talk about how concrete is, I can talk about the physical properties of concrete. And then I can take it into a different stream. But I talked about how concrete is made, and I brought it down to curing time. So that's that presentation in between. Now is where you introduce the problem, because at some point in the introduction you state the specific problem your study focuses on, or you identify a gap in the existing research, and this will be filled in your paper. So now you want to identify the question, like, although concrete is this, its curing time has not been understood completely yet. Okay, so now you've identified the gap. Now you want to end it. Okay, so now when you end it, you want to create this flow, because although you have subtitles and they identify where you're going, you want the reader to feel as if they're absorbing ideas. So at the end of the introduction, you need to enable your readers to move into the central section, which should be your method. Okay, now what is the importance of your introduction? Let's look at the 5 key points on the side apart from the timeline. What is the importance? In the introduction, you established the importance of the research, and then only the readers, after they know the importance of your research, only then will they be actually interested in your content. And others, they may dismiss your research if they don't understand its true importance. Now, at the start, you want to use a starting fact, and the one I used in this case, the one I'm making up, is concrete is essential to the engineering revolution, or something like that. That's my starting fact. So this starting fact should be the meeting place, because all readers, you're going to have a whole range of readers. You're going to have ones that are really interested, or ones that are just reading for fun because it's in the journal or whatever there is. And so you want to start with a fact that everyone can agree with, even like all the precise engineers and everyone that's just reading it for fun. And so that's going to be the meeting place. That's how they're all going to go into your video. That's how they all get sucked in. So so when you find that starting fact, you want to ensure that it is something that everyone can agree with. Now, when you're talking about the background information, so when we talked about, this is the present thing, where you were talking about the background information, and the thing with background information is that you want to present it depending on in which way you want to take your paper. So when you're presenting that, you don't want to provide unnecessary information. Like, you don't want to go into too detail. You can mention the physical properties of concrete, but you don't want to go into too detail about them. So you want to ensure that you fill all the gaps about the stream that you're taking it into. Don't be so focused on everything else that you forget the importance of what you need to actually talk about, what your paper will actually address. So yeah, and as a general rule, it is better to provide slightly too much background information than slightly too little, because you have to imagine that your average reader is one that reads just for fun, or like, it depends on who you're writing the paper, but in most cases it's going to be someone that, well, has a good amount of general knowledge, and they're just reading scientific papers. Or if it's for a teacher, that's the kind of thing you want to assume. So it's better to have a little too much background information than have the reader wondering, so leave no doubts. Okay, citations. When you start to introduce like precise background information, because at the start it's going to be really broad, and then you're going to start to introduce precise background information, and when you start to identify gaps, you want to back it up. You need to back it up in other studies. So if you're identifying a gap, that's kind of like an accusation, right? So you want to make sure that you know where you're getting this information up, because if there's no citations, people might think you're making up the information. And similar with that, when you're using really precise information that people are not very familiar with, like if I'm saying Newton's third law, like I'm studying that, I'm writing about that. Everyone can agree with that. I don't need to cite that. I don't need to cite like one of Newton's books, because this is common knowledge. But like if I'm talking about, the pressure of this specific pipe in a dam, then I need to cite that information because I'm getting that from another research paper. Okay? Now, last one, introduce the issue. So before you describe the specific problem that you will, look at in your research paper, you kind of want to lead the reader into it. So you want to ensure that what you're going to talk about is that you want to place it so that it's the current focus of the field. Like, let's say I'm talking about the curing time for concrete. I'd say something like, the curing time for concrete is, although the curing time for concrete is not understood, and this has major implications for, the construction industry, because it impacts the amount of time they need to do this and that and blah, blah, blah. And so that kind of makes the reader feel like this is actually a significant issue, and it's at the center of what everyone is, of, the field itself. And when you introduce the issue, you also want to do it using signal words. So you want to say, like, how I used, although the curing time for concrete, although concrete is important, the curing time has not yet been understood. That although kind of hints that this is the gap over here. Because if someone's skimming your paper, they're going to be looking for those kind of signal words like however, although, and that's where they quickly locate, okay, so here's where, the gap is. Here's what this paper is going to address. So yeah. And so that's what you want to do. Another thing, you don't want to be too shy when you're pointing out problems in previous research, because that kind of makes you look, because although that may look, although you may think that it makes you look dumb, it's not going to make you look dumb, and it's not going to, in fact, it's going to show that you actually understand what you're reading or what you're writing about. And so what it does is that it shows that you're a sensible reader, and it's also not disrespectful if you point out problems in other people's research, because you're not targeting them for their research, you're targeting the research itself. And so it kind of shows it's not disrespectful. Just don't be afraid if you want to point out something wrong with research, because you can say that although this person did this research on curing time of concrete, that was done like 50 years ago, and it's probably not valid today, so we need to do research on it again, something like that. Okay, next, your generic introduction model. So this is kind of everything summed up, and next up we have an example. So firstly, what you want to do is that you want to establish the importance, then you want to provide background factual information, and then you want to present the general problem and the current focus. So that's what we did. Now that you've kind of narrowed it down, you want to present previous and or current research. So now you're going to narrow it down even more, and this is where the citations come in. So now you've narrowed it down to like the really last bit, and here's where you locate a gap in the research. You describe a problem that you will address, and this is how you identify the research opportunity. Now, you've identified the problem. Now you want to tell them what the paper will do. So you want to tell them, this is what the paper is planning on achieving. And if we are able to understand this, we can revolutionize this, and this in real life. So that's how you model your introduction. And here is an example. So what is this about? This is about a lightweight chitted PLA composite for load-bearing biomedical applications. And as you can see here, is that what they've done is we've split it into the 4 key sections: establish research, locate a gap, and then present the paper. And then we've done and then there's a sentence by sentence breakdown on how the introduction actually works. And this I got from Science Research Writing, 2nd edition by Hilary Glassman Dew. And so if you want more information on this, please check out that book. But this is the overall structure of how you want to model your introduction. So what I've done is that I've taken this model and I've tried to make it easier for you to understand. I've made a table, and so this kind of contextualizes everything that we've learned. So this is how you write the introduction. Now in the next video we're going to look at how you write the method. So this is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, the next video is going to be on methods. Till then, bye bye.